So welcome everyone to our very first session for 2025 for Psychosomatic Conversations. I'm here today with Sean Yago, Christy Foster, and myself, Linda Thackeray. And we've had the absolute pleasure of hosting these conversations now for more than a year. And we are going to be continuing to host them on topics that we receive information from you that you would like us to be speaking on. We have found the three-part series to be a very effective way, and we're going to continue working with that. But there's something very special as we come in on the January vibration, being the first month of 2025, and also from a numerology numerology perspective, being the year of a number 9. So it ties in with our theme very nicely, the stories that you carry, emotional patterns. And the 9 is all about taking a look at endings and what you would start to plant for new beginnings. So if there are things that you would like to do in this year that you haven't done, you've had on your list to do for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, it's a good time to actually consolidate and to start to bring your energies together and go, am I going to complete some of those long-term projects that I've been putting off for a very, very long time? And not only that, but also working out what is no longer serving you. And what is no longer serving you also relates to the stories that you're carrying. What is your new truth as you move forward in 2025? So in today's session, we're going to do a recap for some of those that might be new to psychosomatics. Our community is growing, and we thank everyone for sharing these videos with your friends, your family, and people that you think might be interested in the psychosomatic conversations. They are all around mind, body, spirit connection, health and well-being, relationships, and really importantly, the relationship that you have to yourself. So given the fact that some of you might be new to psychosomatics, we're going to also offer some explanations as to what it is, why it's important, and then we're going to move into the stories that you carry, looking at the back. So rather than me continuing to speak, I'm going to hand over firstly to Sean and then to Christy, and I'll come back to myself. Sean, psychosomatics, your brief description of psychosomatics could be a book into itself, right?
Brief?
Yes, a brief title of Life is Eternal. Psychosomatics is very much part of my everyday and has been for many decades now. And the word itself, I used to have an aversion to, and I used to find it very clinical. But now I've come to appreciate the design of the word. So the psycho referring to the mind, to also the psyche that lives there. And then the soma being the body and the relationship between them. And it is so fascinating to notice when there may be a conflict between what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling. I have learnt across time what I'm feeling is where I need to be most loyal, because what I'm thinking is usually something learnt, either through my own history or through influences around me. So it's definitely a deepening of the body relationship.
Thanks, Sean. Christy, how about for you?
I feel like I eat and breathe, live psychosomatics every day. It's something that's so dear to me because it's really helped me create a map for myself. And when I'm working with clients to help them understand their map or their own vehicle, which is their body, how do I drive this? How do I make it work better? What are these bells and whistles about? Psychosomatics is one of the most profound forms of education and a modality that really help us as human beings evolve, because we become aware of our patterns, our mental patterns, and then also how we're holding it in our physical body, because both matter. You can't have one without the other. And to me, that's the value of psychosomatics, is the understanding of who we are as human beings. And I love it so much, and I appreciate all of the people that have really created this idea, people that have passed, people that are here now, and we are here because we love it. And I appreciate all of you being here and wanting to learn more about how you function from a psychosomatic lens, because it offers more information so we can live a better life.
Yeah. Thanks, Christy. And, I was obviously reflecting on this question this morning as well. The statement from both of you that it's a lifestyle. It's a very much an everyday part of our worlds, but also the educational component, that's such an important part of it. When I consider psychosomatics and the stories and the protective mechanisms that people adapt in order to feel safe in the world, and how those protective mechanisms can actually take on a persona that separates the person from their unique true self. And I think by really considering all of those patterns, the energy flow within the body, where the thoughts go, how people embody that, not only in terms of their feelings, but how that's physically embodied in the body. So taking a look at posture, breathing, voice, and also the unconscious patterns that people become unaware of because they're so they become so much a pattern of their everyday world, that bringing that education piece is such an important part to bring it to the conscious mind, rather than just simply have it as a default pattern of behavior. Yeah, great. So all of us experience different students from different walks of life. And one of the key, I guess, is to take a look at the distinction between personal development and professional development. So, Chris, I'm going to ask you this question to start with. You have a lot of professionals coming into your trainings, and you also have people coming in for personal development. Can you explain from your perspective what is attracting people that already have their expertise into the field of psychosomatics?
Intrigue. Usually it is a referral, in that I'm thinking of a woman that came in about a couple weeks ago, a psychotherapist. She was referred by another psychotherapist because she had asked this woman that was one of my students, how do you know that about people? How are you able to gauge a conversation with, they're both couples therapists, how do you gauge those conversations so they're easier? And she was explaining about the face reading and giving her a brief overview of how the shape of someone's face determines how they communicate, what their lens is in the world. And so that's how I was able to have another referral by her, is because the curiosity of, well, how do you do that? Because it makes it so much easier. And that's what she was explaining, is the simplicity of understanding someone without them needing to tell you how they view the world or how they process information. And that's one example. Yeah. Because this psychotherapist gets such amazing results with her people. And she's told me that it's psychosomatics that helps her get those results faster. And people feel, especially in therapy and couples therapy, the understanding is different because she can place both faces really basic about how they communicate to set the stage as they begin.
Yeah. I love that description. Sean.
Yeah, superb. The ability to have the clarity and the awareness of the words that you use and how someone's able to absorb them or reject them, and the willingness to recognize the nature of your own form and the language it requires in order to be stimulated.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think from bringing the awarenesses to what's actually happening for a person, to be able to see something in the body when the client says they don't relate to a comment being made, to recognize that if the body is holding the story and we're seeing it as an energetic pattern, that the energetic pattern is there, and it allows the therapist to ask specific questions and to stay on point when a client may make a statement about themselves and you're reading a completely different part of their personality.
Mm.
Um,
Especially when somebody's suffering a particular symptom or are experiencing uh, emotional anguish or mental conflict. It's really important to be able to assist that person in locating where they are, and how that became that way.
yeah. We do get a lot of people coming in for pain, right? So they've got pains, they've been to the doctor, and the doctor has said, there is nothing actually physically wrong with you. It's psychosomatic. And I think that's the word that people previously associated with psychosomatics.
Mm.
But that too is changing.
Yeah, very
It
much.
is, because when they get that, I would say most people don't know what that means. And in the past, even the doctors usually will refer out to a therapist because that's not what they do for pain.
Yeah.
They can do the physical aspects, but how the connection is beginning to happen, that's where psychosomatics is so powerful, because both are relevant, a therapist and a doctor. And then how I see where we fit in is putting those two pieces together so they can connect them and begin to utilize both and their own body to begin to work through and heal in whatever capacity that they're able to.
Restoring the relationship between mental, emotional, and physical.
Yeah.
Yeah, creating the clarity of that trinity so they're all focused from the same point of view, which enables this space of the individual signature to rise.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just going to read one of the testimonials that has come in from one of the students of psychosomatics, because I think it's really useful just to get their perspective. I am a psychologist and a psychosomatic trauma therapist, dealing with acute and chronic trauma presentations on a daily basis. I found this training informative, accurate, and very helpful to improve my practice, as understanding of clients' current and past history of trauma, stress, mood, personality, and emotional states showing up on the face. I feel more confident to approach sensitive questions through an improved lens of compassion and empathy, trauma-informed care that allows clients to feel seen, heard, and understood without them even uttering a word, resulting in improved rapport and connection with you. And that improvement of rapport and connection, when people feel seen, they feel so much more seen.
And they'll experience that as embrace.
Yeah.
A comforting embrace, which in turn helps deconstruct a lot of the hypervigilant responses to life. So,
Yeah.
mm,
Christy, did you
I
want to
really
add to that?
believe, I really believe that one of the most important aspects in healing, in whatever capacity that is being witnessed in it.
Yeah.
And psychosomatics is a witnessing of the patterns that exist, the pain that exists, whether that be emotional or physical, and being with ourselves in that, but also having someone hold that with us as we direct them to noticing those patterns or language in their head that is creating or possibly creating some of the pain or distortion in the body, because we're going to talk about back today. It's so relevant to the pain.
Yeah.
very much.
Creating a normal platform for some of the internal dialogue that goes on. I find often a lot of clients that I see, they don't have a safe space to explore their own thoughts because the judge, the critic comes in, and instead of being able to explore what it is they're truly feeling, they feel more judged internally. And
Mm.
that's definitely
Hence,
where a therapist comes in.
yeah, and
Almost protects them from themselves.
but that's what I was going to say, because it goes into a psychic loop where the brain just keeps repeating the same issue and the same belief, and that's when it really begins to settle in the body and the tissue, especially over years and years and years. That is the accumulation of that energetic thought first, and then the snapshot of what happened or the remembering continues to store in the body, because the body doesn't understand time. It goes back to what it remembers, what it's being told, what it's seeing. And psychosomatics brings that into present time. And the value of having a practitioner that understands the work to teach you how to do your own work in the moment when it comes in, or when your body is going into distortion, how can I shift out of that? And so the best part about psychosomatics is you as a practitioner, or you as just someone wanting to learn it, is you're the one that gets to access your own power in how you shift that. And it takes a while. I'm not going to say you snap your fingers with one time and it's over, but over time, the body does know how to respond to new feedback, like a computer getting an upgrade. That's what psychosomatics does. It helps us to upgrade our physical self and our psychological self.
Software and hardware. Yeah.
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 Which kind of leads nicely into the energy becoming dense into the body. Christy, would you like to take this one?
I love the question why. I love questions. Let me just say that. So someone coming in with low back pain, why does this hurt? I bent over, I picked up a magazine, my back went out when I was in the ER, and I can't imagine why that happened, for example. And as we start to talk, the questions that I would ask are about someone's belief system. And if we're talking about low back, a few examples. The low back holds the energy of, do I have enough money, safety, security, support, love and support of ourselves and others? So to begin to ask questions like, do you feel like you have enough money? We'll talk really basic. No, I don't feel like I have enough money. And that belief, because oftentimes that belief over a long period of time starts to create a contraction in the low back and the hips. And that's one example. And that contraction over 40, 50 years, there's no mobility left in the tissue, the bones, to be flexible. And so picking up a magazine or a sneeze and their back goes out is an accumulation over time of energetic weight, WEIGHT, that becomes very, very dense in the tissue. But it hasn't been noticed for 40 years. And then all of a sudden they're surprised that their back went out because they sneezed or picked up a magazine. And so to begin to help someone understand that what they believe matters in how their body is responding to that belief.
Yeah.
And how else the body requires that space to be in order to be natural.
And so the topic today being the stories you carry and the back of the body. The back of the body also represents the past psychosomatically. So even more relevant is the stories that we carry because they're stories from the past. The front of the body is a lot more present with today into the future, worry, and also being present in a very different way with the body. But as we're looking at the back, those past stories can help define our level of support that we have.
Yeah. And the spine has a natural curve in it for that compression of life, but also the response to life. And then over time, when we see bone move in particular directions, whether that's through compression or whether that's moving left or right, then we can see part of the mental organization that's going on. Bone is very responsive to our thoughts and what we're thinking. And the tissue that surrounds it is the supporting tissue. It's our emotional support of how we fluidly move through something. And so the spine in itself is that statement of have you got the spine to stand up? And that's standing up for ourselves, but it's standing up in life itself. In order to have our arms and legs move in the natural directions that are necessary and the responses that are coming from the nervous system, it needs to come from the spine. The spine is the central core mechanism that establishes the foundation for all other appendages.
Yeah.
So the spine is very much the extension of what we think, but it also is the mind entering into a physical world through that mechanism called the bone. Christy, what wonderful things have you seen with spines?
So many.
I know things get so over-accentuated in particular places and spaces, doesn't it?
It does. And I think one of the main themes, I'll call it a theme,
Sure.
that I do see with women specifically is there's the bone and the muscle create a little indent at the back of the spine, just right above your pelvis. There starts to become an indent there, and that pattern within that spine. And like I said, a lot of times I see it more with women is pleasing, is bending over backwards.
That lurching forward.
Yes, wanting to help. Yep. And so there's the wanting to help in the body moving towards that. And yet what's being forgotten is the individual and helping ourselves and what is it I need, and not understanding that that's as valuable as helping creates over time a lot of pain, because they're not coming back into themselves
Mm.
and allowing that tissue to relax instead of always being on. And what do I need to do? How can I serve? How can I give more? Because that's where a lot of value is placed.
Mm-hmm.
And bring it back into the self and begin to even notice that there's tension in the pelvis and notice there's tension in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And what is that about? And how can I relax into that in a different way? And that's the dialogue and the conversation about bringing awareness to that kind of pattern or distortion in the spine.
Yeah, giving the sense of self its own moment. Yeah, you could even say have its own cubicle. Yeah, having its own moment within itself, before that is shared amongst others.
Yeah. And even bringing in sometimes when a student or a client has that habitual pattern, to start to get them to feel what is actually occurring in advance of the habitual pattern. So that, because the way you described it, Chrissy, bending over backwards, sometimes people may not necessarily know the terminology of that, but saying yes when they want to say no, becoming frustrated because they're hearing themselves say yes, and really getting them to stop for a second and think about what would it be like if I actually said no. And the thought of creating a disruption in the field around them with others, with if I say no, what's that going to mean for other people? So there's a huge amount of expectation and that unnecessary responsibility. But there can come a lot of anger with that as well. And the anger may not be recognized by the client. So even by just opening up conversations and having more specifically targeted questions, we can go into a field of exploring emotions that the client may not have shared with other people ever in their entire life.
Yeah, and that in itself is, I notice a lot with clients, the secrets that are kept.
Yeah.
And that's very much when you see between the shoulder blades very overextended. Yeah, the secrets put into what I call the vault. And we put them in the vault so no one can hear or see them, but we're storing them in the flesh, and that becomes apparent through the disorganization of the body itself. So it's those secrets. It's not about sharing the secrets with somebody. It's about no longer needing to store those secrets.
Oh, I like the way you've said that, Sean. Yeah.
Because they belong to that person. They're very intimate expressions of the individual that need to be heard on behalf of this organization called my body, and they need to be experienced, and therefore they need to be flushed through my body. I need to be able to viscerally feel what that was like, so it's no longer a secret, not even to me.
Yeah. So one of the things with the body work and with what Sean's explaining, Sean, I'm going to stay with you for a second. So
Sure.
can you explain the difference between when you're working with a client that has had the vault
Yes.
to actually starting to be more available to change the relationship with the story, not necessarily even sharing the story, but changing the relationship? What do
Yeah.
you notice in the body tissue?
So across time, what I've noticed is that the slower the connection that you can create with the person and their current physical challenge is to give them silence and time, but at the same time, the pressure creates the sensation to reconnect to what may be in there. And it's giving them a moment with themselves that they haven't taken before. They haven't had that moment to consider what's in there. They're usually moving on to the next thing or discarding the last thing. And and it enables a reconnection to take place, which in turn can also show their mind what else is stored deeply within them that also needs to be experienced. Because we're not really a filing cabinet. We're not built for that. We're not built for storage. Yet we are a vehicle that has the capacity to be able to reach into so many different sensory experiences simultaneously and survive. A mind is a thing that when it wants to take control and protect us and lock things down, it traps things in, rather than the mind recognizing that the body can actually experience something that may be extraordinarily profound, from a mind's point of view, and then realize that we're still safe afterwards.
Christy?
So it's the ability to be able to bring them back into that space which has become null and void, but needs to have pulsation back through it.
It's a great way to explain that, Sean. When I'm working with someone doing emotional release, what I'm hoping for and inviting curiosity in is there's like a wave that goes through. As the emotion comes up, the body literally starts to expand or contract. And in that expansion or contraction is that wave, and to allow the wave to move through them, through the experience of emotion. Because it can move through sound, it can move through tears, it can move through movement.
Laughter.
But it's the allowing of the space within them because it's theirs. All I'm doing as a practitioner, a psychosomatic practitioner, is showing them how to open the window. It's still their decision as the client of how fast to open the window, when, and all that kind of thing. But there's an invitation of the allowing of the emotion that got trapped, like Sean was explaining, and allowing it a place to be expressed, and in a safe way. And it's a movement, and it probably feels like forever, but it's usually just it's a moment of like a minute or 2 minutes of some tears, some movement in the body, because the body is so smart. It knows how to release that as we trust it enough to do whatever that is. And it's not linear. It doesn't make sense sometimes. And that can be really tricky, because the brain will be going, why is that happening? And what is she doing? And blah, 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 blah. And so my work is to keep them with the breath where I'm at, bringing awareness to the pattern that's held, and then inviting them to allow the release and the intelligence of their system to do it, not me.
Training a
Their
brain
system
to
does the work.
listen.
Yes, and it's a beautiful process, and it's so profound. It's so profound.
I love the visual language, the vault, opening up the window. I sometimes, when I'm working with clients, I'll use the language of, creating the fortress. And you create it without windows in order to feel safe. And then recognize that once all of those four walls and the roof are around you, that you've locked yourself in and you no longer know how to get out. And to energetically start to think about that window being built, or a door that you can enter and come back in whenever you feel the need. But also with the tissue as well, that opening up from that rigid structure to have more flexibility, to allow
Life through.
life
Life
through.
must pass through us.
But also just to enjoy life more, right?
Wow, when you
Yeah.
recognize that you can digest life, or let it through, or allowing it to pass through you so you can actually experience all that it has to offer, and no longer need to filter it, then you access more of yourself and all of your sensory awarenesses, as well as being able to recognize that the intensity of whatever you're about to experience is a wave, and it rises and it falls.
Yeah.
And your willingness to be able to allow that through, so you can see who you are through that experience.
So true.
So often people experience themselves in a particular light or a particular preference, and that may be discounting who they actually are. So their willingness to be able to experience what life has before them is most definitely creating an opportunity for you to see more of yourself.
Yeah. I want to share a story coming from that thread, Sean, of who we think we are. An example, this ties into low back pain, is a long time ago, and I do have permission to share this story. A client of mine was leaving her religion, leaving her belief system, which is held in the base of the body. So the feet, the pelvis, that's that energetic area of belonging and our culture, our loyalty. And she said, so she went through a process, she left, and then her back completely went out. Her feet hurt so much she couldn't walk on them. And as we were talking about it and talking about this process of allowing the space of fear and possibility at the same time, and we were working through it and talking about it, and her system literally started to let go in her back as she could see new possibilities within her own system and how they connected back to the tissue. And her body literally started to let go, and the pain, it took a little while still, but she wasn't locked into what she was told she was or what would happen to her if she left. And she was able to access her own power through choice, through the ability to walk through the unknown and trust that her system could do it. And then hence what she was told she would be or who she was literally started to change, and that flow of energy starts to come out in her life, in her body, in her nervous system, in her energy. Was one of the most profound stories of a psychosomatic process of the base and the back that I just love that she was willing to be in the unknown and experience all of that, so her body could move it through her.
Unplug from one thing, unplug from the group of that one thing, back into the individual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Love it.
Okay. So just wondering if anyone may have any questions, and if you have any questions, if you want to put them in the chat so that we can answer those questions for you. And just whilst you're thinking about those questions, Christy, I'm reminded as well, one of my very first trainings of this lady who had gone through some huge life challenges. And the student that was reading her, she was basically saying no pretty much to everything that was being said. Anyway, it was the final day. We're putting skills into action. And the student asked for some assistance. And she already, she came from her own qualification previously as well. So she was already a therapist in her own right. But one of the challenges that we experienced was that this lady had been told she'd been in a massive car accident. She had been told she was never going to walk again. And here she is. She's not only is she walking, she's functioning really well and achieving a miraculous change, but she couldn't put her feet on the ground. Now, she had one foot on the ground and the other was the toe touch, just the toes touching. And I worked with her. I worked with her feet and with some of the other students as well. And she was absolutely terrified because she believed that she couldn't put her feet on the ground and connect. And literally, she connected both feet and was walking with both feet by the end of the training. So the belief system, in terms of the story, had still got locked in a pattern within her body, going, I'm now functioning. I'm not in a wheelchair, but I still can't do this because my body's not going to allow me to do it. So her body had healed, but in her mind was still part of the protective nature that she couldn't actually put her foot down on the ground.
Mm.
And it's just amazing how we do that. I know for myself, when I was first doing psychosomatics, my neck injury that I had from being hit by an interstate transport truck, changing some of the protective patterns around that, whether it's the lower back or we're going to come into the neck on part 3 on the series, but it's amazing what protective patterns get held in the back.
Oh, amazing, phenomenal.
Yeah.
That's clients appear constantly with limitations in one way or another. And just reopening those physically enables them to remember what an open space looks like. Leanne has offered us a question. She said, what emotions affect the pancreas? Have you got any incidences where you have treated someone for pancreatic issues? So the answer is yes, pancreas. The pancreas is a very sensitive organ. It balances the sugars in the body. It also establishes, it's all right, she's just added an extra question in there, and I'll read it out now just so we can include it with where we are. Can bullying sit within the joints and cause constant pain because of long-held negative emotions and protective patterns? Can it manifest as hypermobility issues? Okay, so we've got 2 questions. So I'm going to stay with the pancreatic one first, and then we'll come back across to the joints. Thank you, Leanne. And the pancreas often is an invisible organ. People tend to forget about it, but it is the organ that coordinates joy in the body because of the balancing of the sugar factor. And the pancreas over time can lose its capacity. Now, when an organ loses its capacity over time, then we're also aware that there are behaviors that are also changing or dissipating over time. Now, relative to the degree of the pancreatic representation through the symptom is also relative to the individual and their life experience thus far. Also, please understand that psychosomatics isn't necessarily about avoiding death. Death is something that occurs to our physical being and our physical body, and our exiting strategies for that are also about the conclusion of outstanding experiences that have taken place in our lives. So when we look at how somebody is relating or connecting with their pancreas, we also need to notice or understand how are they currently experiencing or animating or activating joyful situations in their life. They may have had unjoyful situations over a long period of time, which also takes its toll.
Yeah. Just to add to that, Sean,
Yes.
that chronic stress, the underlying stress, because it is such a sensitive organ, stress pattern can often be the part that's actually contributing to that lack of joy.
Oh, there's no fun, right? There's no
And
fun.
also because it's the pancreas, lack of sweetness.
Yeah.
Um,
Sweetness to self and sweetness with others.
yeah.
And that's also about the innocence of the self and how we play with that innocence. And no different to how we sit down and play with a child. How do we sit down and play with our innocence?
Mm. I had a client a few weeks ago that came in with acute pancreatitis.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been seeing her for a long time. So we were able to have a conversation. Her life experience has been, she feels like she's had to live with this person who is an addict, and yet she didn't feel like she had a choice. And so it was it had accumulated over a long period of time because she was scared about what to do. She didn't feel like she had a choice. And she didn't know how to, when I asked her what brings her pleasure, what brings her joy, I don't know. What do you mean?
Mm.
And that's a really common answer is, what do you mean? And that innocence that you're talking about, Sean, it's a simple answer and sometimes a very complex answer if it hasn't been addressed or even asked or cultivated.
Yeah.
And then the body over time, remember, the body starts to accumulate experience, belief, sometimes unprocessed trauma, and then parts start shutting down.
Or showing up.
Or showing up, which, yes, both.
Or showing up.
Both, yep.
And on that, when we look at that compression that takes place, it puts us in line with, there's just been a few more questions I just want to join into that conversation. Leanne was talking about bullying and joints. Yeah, talking about protective patterns and hypermobility. So the ability for a joint to be able to access its freedom of movement and its full freedom of movement, those statements already show us about what part of us is experiencing of what's in the way. Yeah, if we think of a fan, and if we think of things that lock in and therefore the fan has trouble moving, we're looking at what are those things that are in the way that stops things from moving? What are the current experiences of limitation? How am I experiencing limitation? What is limitation like for me? That in itself, as I process what it's like for me, I'm able to recognize how else this needs to be. Therefore, I know how I need to act on my own behalf. And this also maps in with a question from MW, which we assume is Michael, but we're not sure. And it's also looking at how the vertebrae or the changing shapes of vertebrae, what are the gaps between the vertebra? So each vertebra has its specific purpose and necessity for the body. And each vertebra, relative to where it resides within the spine, is also telling us an even more deeper story around how that structure currently forms itself or how that structure is feeling deformed by life. Yeah, we're seeing the pressures that surround it. Yeah. So we're able to have a look at which part of this person's life is under duress. What is the experience of duress first and foremost? Because so often people are unwilling to feel the experience of what duress is, yet feeling the part of the pathway of resolve is to understand what the sensation is in the first place. And then as that sensation opens up and moves through, then we also open up into the natural nature of how freedom can be and what it feels like.
Yeah.
So we can't bypass that.
And just on the question as well, where you're talking about this, the spine being straight, I think it's Michelle, the spine being straight.
Thanks.
What you're also looking at is there is an ongoing attitude that's starting to create a rigidity. So the rigidity of thought can show up as a holding pattern in much the same way as what we were talking about earlier, the stories that we tell ourselves, and the rigidity is requiring a comprehension in order to create space. So we're looking at which area is straight, and obviously we need to have the corresponding curves that go with it, because we've got the three
Yeah, the
curves,
shape of the spine.
real curves.
Yeah. And when we look at the moment that there's a pinch anywhere in my spine, I go, oh, there's a feeling or a sensation that the part of my mind is unwilling to allow. There's a vulnerability there that needs to be experienced, that my mind is locking out. And the moment that I allow myself to be vulnerable and consider a sensation or a feeling, whether that be hopelessness, helplessness, impact, hurt, that's when the mind changes and becomes the listening being, and that's when the feeling comes up, and that's when that pinch or that limitation also lifts and moves. So for all of us as individuals, it's really important. Yes, we want to be robust people in this world, yet you can be that, and you also need to be incredibly sensitive and vulnerable, because that's part of being human. And Maria has just asked a question: what does it mean when someone has a double spine cord? So this is an unusual question. It's not something that I've come across very often. But when we look at the spine cord and the spine cord that comes from the brain itself and runs down the spine, we're looking at a central nervous system that has double the ability of sensory awareness. So it wouldn't surprise me if this person was potentially a medium, but certainly somebody who has the ability to infinitely experience through the nervous system what's occurring, that sensory awareness in life. There would be a hypersensitivity to things, but at the same time, there's an accessing of information that would be quite profound for that individual to be able to handle.
I would see that as extremely challenging to begin with, to learn how to harness and work with that high sensitivity, because we each have, I think it's important to understand, we have fabulous questions, and thank you. And to remember that it's individual. There isn't a perfect answer for every question. It's an understanding of your own system. What are you noticing? What are you feeling? And moving into that. Because even the double spinal cord, I can't even imagine. And that, like Sean, that's a great example of someone that might be a medium or a psychic, because that sensitivity is so massive in their nervous system. Yeah. So it is very individual in our experience, and how, like, even coming back to the pancreas, our experience of how we relate to the world. Everyone's different in that.
Yeah, and how the world enables me to feel me and my willingness to experience that.
Yeah.
Which is also where we're taking a look at how many times does a theme present in the same body. If it's there once, it's kind of there. If it's there twice, it magnifies. 3 times, it gets larger. 4 times, it's like a categoric theme. So we're always looking for the full body experience, and of course the individuality amongst that.
Yeah.
What a great conversation today.
Yes.
I love it. Oh, here, sorry, I'm just reading. There's just one more comment that's come in. Oh, right. That's Maria confirming more about the double spine cord. Apparently this person was born with it. The doctors can't do anything about it. I'm not sure it needed to have anything done about it. All slight movements make her incapable to move. And that's the sensory hypervigilance that's there. Lasts for 6 weeks and then she's fine until she hurts it again. So there's this fluctuation that's happening, yeah. And our symptoms all go, here, would you like to master that in greater way this time? It revisits for us to understand even further how to utilize that experience. Because it is most certainly of benefit because it's there. And it's a matter of discovering the unique benefits of having that there. Because there will be something timely that does occur for that person that triggers the response within the nervous system, within the spinal cord itself. So looking at the lifestyle that surrounds that.
Thank you. We will be going in on the second part of the series, and the third we will be asking for further questions. If you've got questions as well that you'd like to send in advance and you can't make the next 2 sessions, please also send those questions in. We're very, very happy to answer what we can answer. You'll find maybe there will be some we can't answer, but generally
we'll do our best.
We'll do our very best to answer it.
And next month is skin, correct?
Next month is skin. We're looking at
Skin.
individuality.
Individuality. Fascinating.
That will be a great conversation too.
Okay. Christy, can you press recording?